Rohit, Arvind, welcome to SaaS Talks number 5. And again, a very warm welcome to all the participants who are on the call as well. I'll keep the introduction short because I think many of you have attended this in the past. But the intent is that we want to have discussions on very specific functional topics of building a SaaS company. This is not meant to be a panel. This is not meant to be a monologue or a Gyan session. This is not meant to be a webinar either. It is genuinely meant to be a discussion. And hopefully not sort of some long-term or sort of a rags to riches, etc. kind of a story. But usually as you're building companies, you face specific problems in specific areas and you have questions. And the intent is to take these micro topics and have a discussion around it. To set the stage, in each of these sessions, we invite one anchor. Sorry, there is a mobile in my background. My apologies. Harley Davidson, but it's not mine. So in each of these, we invite one anchor guest to set the stage. And again, I'm very happy to welcome Rohit Chennamaneni to this session. I have known Rohit now, as you were just discussing, for the last 4 years. Rohit is the co-founder of Darwinbox. Also used to be with two sort of not very well-known companies called McKinsey and Google in the past as well. And as I sometimes end up repeating in many of these sessions, Darwinbox is one of those companies where I have made the mistake of not being an investor in the past. So my list of anti-portfolio just keeps growing by every year in this profession also. And they have done a fabulous job of building Darwinbox. So the format is that post this, I will just take 10-12 minutes to ask a few questions myself. Some other people might join the panel as well. And in fact, I want to make a request that I'm just using the word panel for the lack of any better sort of English that I know at least, which is that those of you who are attending right now and have a meaningful product background, please don't be shy. Raise your hand and Naman, my colleague, can actually bring you into this. It'll lead to a more healthy discussion. And once we are past those first 10-12 minutes, anybody either in the audience or those whose screens are live, they can ask questions, they can answer questions, and we will take it as sort of the flow goes along. Hi Tanaya, how are you? So that's the format. With that, let me get started. And Rohit, just to begin, just to set the context, I think it'll be good if you can literally give like a 30-second description of what Darwinbox is so that people have the context. I'm sure everybody knows, but still.
No, absolutely, Alok. Thanks for having me. I'll take 10 more seconds to say Alok has been extremely helpful, while we unfortunately are in the anti-portfolio, but we've always taken that liberty to call him up at any point of time to get advice on anything. And of course, one of the lesser known companies we share some background in. So there is a common McKinsey alum love, but otherwise, thanks so much for this. And thanks for having me. Hopefully this will be useful for people who are attending. So quick background on Darwinbox. Darwinbox is an end-to-end HR technology platform for enterprises in Asia. So we focus on a specific region, which is Asia, and we're going broader into emerging markets. And we take care of the entire spectrum of the employee lifecycle. So if I break that down broadly as a product, we take care of the core recruitment, performance, payroll, time and attendance, all the elements of an employee lifecycle we do. Of course, may not be like a easy answer on products, especially when there are point solutions versus a broader one. So take that in context. Maybe I'll be answering for a broader horizontal solution versus a point solution, which is very deep. So that's a little bit of context whenever I'm answering. So the answer might not be so prescriptive anyway.
Perfect. So Rohit, as I said, for the first 10 minutes, the floor will be yours and partly mine in just asking the questions. So let's get started. I actually want to take you back now a few years, which is that when you first started, I'm sure, see, HR is a fairly discovered category, right? either old age products like PeopleSoft, later like SuccessFactors, Taleo, many others sort of have come into this space as well. As you were deciding to go to market with your first product, whatever that MVP was, I'm just curious to understand, how did you decide the contours? Because that's the first problem that entrepreneurs face. Should my first product be this? Should my first product be that? Right? So I'm just trying to understand, how did you arrive at that answer? And if you look back in hindsight, would you do it any differently?
Yeah. Okay. So maybe a little bit on the proposition that we came up with, right? So me and my co-founders, we were in enterprise-facing roles at McKinsey, EY, etc. So we used to work with companies which are large companies, and we felt that there was a gap in the HR space, and that's why we got in, and most of us get in because there is a gap, right? And when we looked at that gap, we said, okay, there are two things that we want to definitely differentiate ourselves on. One
Right.
was the whole user experience, right? Which is
Yeah.
HRM is on mobile experience, touch points, all of that taken care of, easy to use, all that. And the second bit was configurability for the local context. So it was more in terms of saying, maybe enterprises in different parts of the world are different. So I'll build a system which is configurable to different workflows, etc. Just to give you an example, right? Like an absconding workflow or a 3-level approvals are not standard best practices globally, but very, very common in these parts of the world, right? So solving for those things, solving for different ways of performance management and all of that. Now, while this is a proposition, just narrating this proposition itself takes time, right? Like, so to build an MVP was even more difficult because we had two choices. So one choice was saying, we'll build one module very deep.
Yeah.
Right. So we said, okay, there is maybe time and attendance or performance management very deep. Right. And in a design factor, which we think is ideal for the rest of the modules, right? So we're saying my product is going to be like this. So super configurable one module, super easy to use one module was one design choice. The second was take 5 things and show the power of all modules being in one together, right? So shallow recruitment, shallow performance management, shallow time and attendance, and show the flow.
Yeah.
And we debated this quite a bit, and we went with option 1. The only reason was that when we're going to enterprises, the choice of what they buy sometimes can be dictated by how deep it is, but not by how broad it is, right? Broad is when, like in enterprises, they'll ask you all the questions, right? So they'll not go with a 50% match.
Right.
They'll go with a 70% match. So we said, at least let's build out one module which is 70% match, not 100% match for sure, but a 70% match. And that's how we made a choice.
Right.
The other choice we had was, what will we lead with? And that's the second troublesome choice that will happen, right? Like we have some 5 major modules today. Which is that module we'll pick?
Right.
So there was a choice between, let's say, time and attendance, which is a basic module which small companies also use. We'll be able to sell to more companies or friends companies, etc. Or the performance management, which we wanted to be our spearhead in the future, and we design it in a certain way that becomes super exciting. Right. So, and when we made that choice, and this was a critical part of the choice, right? So we took time and attendance over performance management as a choice, because we said, okay, if we do performance management, we'll have to win with large companies. And can we win in the first 1 year with large companies was a big question mark.
Very nice.
Will they trust us to do this performance management, while we think we can build a really good performance management system, right? But any of the companies which are 100, 200 employees don't go through a detailed performance management process. They'll need something basic. So what we build might not be effective for the persons we sell, and the ones which will be effective for, they might not buy. So we went with the time and attendance, and that's how we led. So the MVP was led through that, where, hey Nitin, you got a very good friend in again. So so the MVP was, that's how the MVP choice was made on time and attendance. So we went to the first 5 customers we co-built with / tried to do a POC with, where we said, this is one module, right? This is the design framework or the philosophy, how we want to build the rest of the modules.
Understand.
Right? Test this, right? You have other parts of the system anyway there. So take just this and trust us on this, and then we will build the others. So that was how we went to the market.
So Rohit, if I then take that forward, it's an interesting thought that, see, first of all, you made a choice that you said that, look, I may not go to large enterprises initially. I may go to slightly smaller to begin with, and eventually go to larger ones with, let's say, a much deeper product and performance management. Fair enough. And you began with time and attendance. Now, as you built even the first product with time and attendance, was the approach that you will actually build it along with you? So these 5 companies that you're talking of, were you building even the MVP along with them, or you were using them to go beyond the MVP to figure out now what's next? How did you sort of, how do you figure out? So it's actually 2 questions therefore composed into one. Should the first product itself be built with a few customers or lighthouse customers, and the second is, how do you figure out the prioritization post that?
Yeah. So we didn't want to build completely the MVP with customers because one, we thought it will be too influenced by that one customer. Okay. So what we did is we took competition, we did research, we did all those things and built out something.
Right.
Right. And also I mean, time and attendance again is a live wire, right? Like everybody is going through their attendance and leaves on a daily basis. So they'll not do experiments. They'll not say employees apply here and apply somewhere else as well. Right? If it works here. Otherwise, it won't do that. So we needed to have something to go into any company, whatever the size that was. Right? Even a company which was using an Excel sheet, there had to be something. So we made the choice of time and attendance. We built out about 50% of our MVP. And we said, okay, the basic rules of applying for a leave will happen. Now, I'll give you the complications, right? For example, sandwich leaves. So a lot of companies in India have Friday and Monday, if you take leave, Saturday, Sunday are also leaves, right? Like, so very, and that's why it's local context that is important, right? So all of these are things which are nuances. And we didn't build all that. We just said, okay, there's a calendar, there's a certain set of leaves, which has balances, reduces, and all of that.
Got it. And therefore, my last question before we open up to the larger forum here. Rohit, I have often, and pretty much in every company that I'm working with today as well as part of my portfolio, but so many other founders that I speak to, even once you have moved past the MVP. And in fact, it's a bit of a challenge that when you are designing the MVP, you have some piece that you can do it yourself to a certain extent. Once you begin to have a few customers, there are customer requests flowing in every day. I need this, I need that, blah, 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 right? And early on, your pressures are also high because not everybody starts paying you annual upfront. There might be those paying you monthly, quarterly, whatever. So you have that gun on the head for their renewals also. Now, as you get bombarded with these requests, even at the time you have the first 10, 15 customers, how do you both tactically and strategically figure out which request to agree to, which one not to agree to, and even those that you agree to, how to prioritize them, how to balance them against the size of the customers you are serving? It's a complex minefield sometimes to navigate, and would love to know what you did and also love your advice for others who are on the call.
Yeah, so I think I think we continue to struggle with this at some level or the other. So there is no perfect answer to this.
Right.
I think one switch that we did, Alok, that was very helpful was when we take a roadmap and you take 100%, we said there will be X percentage for sales, which is when a sales guy is going and meeting some new customer, they are asking for a few things.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're hearing it a lot and if you're able to convert more by building that thing, so that all goes into that X percentage. There is a Y percentage which is based on all our existing customers, right? The customers who've signed with us for 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, whatever that is, right? So they are happy, unhappy based on certain features, etc. And the third was what the product and engineering team can lead, right? Which is, I want to build something cool. I want to build something futuristic. I want to refactor. I want to build a platform, all of those things. Now the theme is designed or defined by the founders, right? Okay. So we need to grow very quickly to break out. So sales gets lion's share, right? We have like a low NPS score this quarter, last 2 quarters. Let's give customers, and the reason for that is requirements and not like bugs or whatever other things, right? Then that is the NPS share, right? I think we're taking a long-term stance. Some of these modules have become solid and we need something cooler to differentiate ourselves from the market. Then it becomes the third, right? So that's the balance that we see. And as we grew, now this balance is coming in each module. So now for every module, this 3 is split. So if you take a recruitment module, there are things that the sales is looking at. There are things that existing customers are asking for, and there are things that you want to build. Right? And because time and attendance was one of the first thing that we built, right? Today we don't have too much what sales is asking for because we have all the features. Right? It's either customers are asking for, which is also less. Now we are only thinking about what else can we do, right? During COVID, we said virtual ID cards and all the things that we're thinking and ideating, brainstorming, and coming up with newer things. Whereas there are modules which we built later, like recruitment, where the first two becomes a much bigger set, which is I'm trying to get to table stakes on this module. I am not ahead of the market or deeper than the market. So I'll first prioritize this, and that's the theme. And then I'll go into what I want to build.
Got it. At this point, I am going to open it up to actually everyone, those who are, I guess, visible with their names on the screen, or those who are actually attending remotely. Actually, today is the largest number of people that we have had. So Rohit, you are clearly a charmer, I have to say. But anybody who wants to ask a question, you can either type it on the Q&A panel. I think some of you have already started doing that. But you should also feel free to raise your hands, and Naman can actually bring you in live as well to even ask a question. And don't feel shy in doing so as well. So let's see. Actually, I am also looking at the questions. And in the meantime, by the way, Nitin, Tanaya, Arvind, if you guys have questions, actually somebody has raised a hand. Avinash Srivastava, Naman, if you can bring Avinash in. All right, Avinash, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi, Avinash.
Yeah, hi, hello. Hi, this is Avinash, and I work for Peak.ai. It's a Manchester-based organization. I work there as a product manager, and we are basically empowering businesses to implement AI solutions.
Okay.
So my question is around while defining a roadmap, which is the theme of this talk. So I just want to understand that what should be our approach, because normally what happens while we try to build a product in a building a blocks kind of thing. So in Agile, we try to build a simpler one, and then we try to deliver the incremental product. So while defining this MVP, what should be our approach? Shall we try to go with the simplest and like Mr. Amit said that Rohit, like Rohit said that they go on for a smaller they go on for something which is of value, like attendance and leave, and then they try to build other modules over and above it. Whereas the other approach could be that where I want to see my product in next 5 years, and then try to break it down, and then try to see what is the simplest thing to deliver of value, obviously, and do that. So what should be our approach? Should it be like see where my product would be 5 years or 10 years down the line, what I really want to make, and then try to work backward? Or it should be start from the smallest unit and try to build over it as and when things move.
So actually, in a way, Nitin, since you can, I'm hoping you can hear us. Nitin, would you want to take a shot at that question?
Sure. I mean, the question was, should we start from where we are and look forward, or sort of look at the vision and then draw our way backwards?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. As well. So it's a bit of a balance, right? I think, like Rohit said, no one size sort of fits all answer. But to me, I think a large part of product management is figuring out what kind of market you are in, rather than just what you want to build or where we are today. Right? HRMS that Darwinbox is in, or work that we do in supply chain, for example, are fairly mature markets. Right? We're not category creating in some sense. We might be innovating on top of sort of giants who are in the category, or sort of saying, hey, there is a better way to do the same thing. Right? So by definition, if you're in categories like that, I think you will start with what you have today, because there's a whole host of sort of innovation that has happened to get to where we are today. And then sort of what we're trying to do is then figure out what can this then mean going forward. I think the other thing that also fundamentally determines this is there some shift in the market because of which you're starting the business you're in, or you're building the products that you're building, right? So, CRM or HRM or ITSM, etc. Is the positioning in the market one that's more distribution led? You believe that one category in the market is not getting addressed as much. You believe that one type of business, let's say the mid market, is not getting as much attention as the SMB and the enterprise, and therefore the same product can then be defined better for that segment of the market or whatever it is. Or like, for example, in the supply chain space, we talk about omni-channel and e-commerce is driving a large change, and that's in turn affecting all kinds of businesses, even if they're B2B. And I think supply chain can be addressed differently because of that, right? And so that will in turn define what your midterm looks like. So the short term of where you are and what you need to do for the next 2 to 3 years, or maybe 1 to 2 years, will be defined by what others in the market have done. The medium term will be defined by what are fundamental sort of trends in what you're seeing. And the long term will be defined in some sense by who you want to be, right? And I think that's very sort of founder, core team sort of specific, right? If you believe that, you're playing a 5 to 7 year game, and a lot of times I think it gets defined by, exit questions, right? You believe that the most probable exit for you is that, a larger company is going to acquire. You believe that the most probable exit for you is that you're going to build. So the market that you're in, are you in the supply chain software market? Are you in the transport management system market, which is even smaller than the supply chain software market? Or are you in the enterprise software market, which is even larger than the supply chain software market? Right? And so you'll then define saying, hey, listen, if I want to build, eventually I want to start building things that, the wallet share that I want to capture of a large enterprise business is X percentage of what? Right? And the denominator matters. It is X percentage of all supply chain software, X percentage of all transport management system, which is even smaller, or X percentage of all IT spends of the company, right? And that will in turn determine what you decide to do in the long run, right? So you can start anywhere here or start in the middle and jump both ways or whatever. Where you start doesn't matter. But I think all three questions of the short term, the medium term, and the long term will have to be answered in some respect.
Got it.
Yeah,
and in most cases, one part I would definitely push for is the viable part of MVP, right? Like, are people buying it, right? So, I mean, if you're too much into the future, which they're going to buy only 5 years from now, or 1 year from now, or 3 years from now, it depends on your time horizon, and you're trying to tweak small things to get to that, till then you will not be in market, you'd probably miss the bus a little bit. Correct. Right? So for me, an MVP is something a customer is ready to use. Right? Not maybe an experiment or a workshop, but like is ready to use for a day-to-day thing. And it should be to that level at least.
Yeah, only caveat there is that both of us are in mature markets, right? And therefore, for us, an MVP is already something that needs to get bought. And so we would always start from here looking forward. We talk to, like, for example, guys at Pratilipi and people who are defining the market in itself. Then they would say, listen, to hell with MVPs, and let's look at sort of where the market needs to go, and then we'll build in that direction. So that's just a caveat to follow because there might be people in the audience. I'm going to go off video because I want to stay focused.
No, you're looking good, and your office is looking good too. Nitin, don't be shy. So I know a couple of people have raised hands, and Naman can bring them in, but I do want to ask one question which has been put on the Q&A panel here. So let's take this thread of new category creation for a moment. And I know you both said that you're not creating, and maybe Arvind, I know you are from Mailage, and in case you think you are a category creator, where what the MVP should be is actually not very clear. You don't know what people are currently buying because they are not buying. It is a new category that you are creating. So the question here from Chandra Rathi, and I'm actually modifying the question a little bit as I'm speaking, is that, is there a good way or a bad way in seeking feedback from your customers on what to build? Or is it a pretty straightforward thing in terms of how to seek that feedback? Anybody can take this question. Arvind, you want to take a shot?
Arvind, yeah.
Yeah. So Before I get into the question, I just want to add one thing to what Nitin and Avinash said. I actually do believe there is some kind of line between the MVP or the earliest version of what you're building being a little too simplistic, especially if you're not in a mature market, if you're in a brand new market and it seems very simplistic, then there is a question of, okay, then is this going to be enough to define a category as such? So that sort of becomes a question, and that sort of raises doubts as well within the team as well as with anyone who's sort of trying out the product and so on. So I think that may be a tricky line to identify and sort of stay on, but it's a good exercise to identify that. That I just wanted to add that. And to this question.
Yeah, Arvind, any point of view on this question in terms of what is a good way or a not so good way of actually seeking feedback from your early customers?
So when I first started my very first company, which is not what I'm working on right now, it was a 3D marketplace, like it was a marketplace for 3D designs. And we thought we were going to be really big. We wanted to partner with all the 3D printer manufacturers, and we went around town shopping for manufacturers and said, hey, we have this and so on and on. And we didn't realize the market was basically just enthusiasts, and it was at a point where you kind of just had to talk to people. The market was too early for enterprises to engage with you. And they weren't even looking at a solution like this. They were experimenting. They were in the earliest stages of experimenting. So, yeah, in the context where you're looking at the 5-year plan or the 10-year plan and you have a grand vision, if the people that you're talking to right now are not, I mean, especially in a new market, if they're not even on the same page or rather on the same book, then there is this thing where you have a lot of false interest. Manufacturers are like, okay, this is interesting, because they're in the experiment phase and they're not in the business state of mind. And so that can lead to a lot of false positives and sort of false hope.
Yeah. So Arvind, let me get in. I don't know if Rohit or Nitin, you guys have a point of view also. That is there a good way or a bad way to seek feedback?
Rohit, you want to go first?
No, so I mean, I think any feedback is good feedback for me. Like I would definitely take it to market, right? And there are different kinds of people in the market, right? It need not be the sponsor, it could be the buyer, it could be, right? And again, we are talking from a category which is more established, right? So people would have seen something, right? And how they react to what you're showing them or talking about is much more easy, right? And I mean, Nitin took interesting examples of Pratilipi, etc., where if you're a category creator and you're in a very exotic category, etc., then at least the premise, like for example, if somebody is creating voice bots, right? The premise that now you're using Google Home at home and you're going to do that in enterprise and there'll be Alexas in every room, right? Kind of a premise should at least be reasonably near term in their head, right? If they think of it as, oh, this is like AI of the future or iRobo, then we are a little early into the market, right? So, and then that can come from conversations, right? That can say, oh, it's cool, but like if you say how much would you spend for it, or like next year would you buy it, you would probably know by then, oh, this might or might not work now itself. But some of these take time to this thing, and as Nitin was saying, right, like maybe some of these take 5 years to build out properly, and you're timing it so that you're ready for the wave that will happen. But if you're in an established category, I think no amount of feedback. And me and Jayant, I remember this. We used to have this thing that we have to do 4 demos a day at the start, right? Like if people are not interested, they have a system. We used to keep doing demos and it all helped, right? Either for feedback, either that person saying, "Oh, these are exciting bunch of kids. Why don't you talk to them?" In some other context somewhere, and that became leads. Right. So we just had this philosophy of just doing demos, right? Like we used to keep on doing demos. We were perfecting this pitch, we were perfecting the product feedback was coming. So it was useful. So I don't think any amount of feedback, especially in the MVP stage, right? Like while, I mean, maybe if you're coding and building, maybe you need your idle time to build, think, and this thing. But we were always on the road, trying to more and more demos.
Got it.
One quick additional point to that, Alok, was when we talk about what feedback to take, we generally talk about the solution that we have, right? And solutions that we have or products that we have might be early to market, late to market, whatever, right? But problems are almost never like, early to market or late to market, right? They exist, right? And so assuming that you've already decided what category you want to be in and what general sort of space that you want to be in, I think the feedback loop should be on problems that you want to address or not address, rather than on specific solutions addressing the problem, because that solution will iterate over time and get better and whatever else, right? Internally, just one quick example there. Internally, the kind of your point, Alok, totally can relate when you say, listen, customer asks are coming from all directions, and then how do you then prioritize? Right? Customer success will come with a bunch of asks, and they would always say, this is a showstopper for a customer. They can't go live without it, right? And we banned the damn word, right? We said, you're asking for one button color change somewhere, and you're saying it's a damn showstopper for somebody, and or one Excel, other line to add up or whatever, right? And so I think the question, I think a culture of just asking customers, listen, what problem are you trying to solve, and where does that stack in the stack rank of the problems you want to solve? And consequently, can we prioritize? More often than not, customers are willing to do that product management work for you as well. And then all you need to do is translate that to your engineering teams more effectively, right? Which is something we learned.
Naman, I think there are 4 people who have raised their hands, so you may need to let a couple of people come in. But I also wanted to add one more point to what Rohit and Nitin have added. And I will confess, I'm not a product guy, so take it with a pinch of salt. But in the enterprise space, see, it's usually enterprises don't buy something for emotional reasons. It's for value reasons. And I do believe that as product managers or founders, it's our job to figure out whether this problem is truly a must solve or not a must solve. People, it's a complex buy. Even your champion has to convince many of the people to buy something. They have to spend a budget. It needs approval. Nobody goes out the way just because it's a good tinkering tool, right? So one of the signals, at least I look for, is that if it's a real problem, they must be trying to solve it a certain fashion today. If they're not even solving it through so many alternative means, it may be kludgy, it may be bad, but I mean, let's take performance management example that Rohit took. It's not as if organizations don't do performance management because software was not available today. They do it. They may be doing it on paper, they may be doing it some other way, but they are doing it in some form. So if nobody is solving for it, even in what you would think of as bad ways, I would argue that it may not be a must-have. So it's important not to get too excited, and I think it's just important to look for how they're trying to do it today also. But Kiran, welcome. Would love for you to go ahead and ask your question.
Hey guys, my name is Kiran. I'm from Hyderabad. I'm founder of an edtech startup named Ignify Technologies. Hi Rohit.
Hey Kiran.
Hi. So the question to you is on pricing, and how does your pricing strategy change as you move phases from in your 0 to 1 phase where you're going deeper in one module, and that module decides a bit of pricing in the market, right? But as you go on building a full-fledged solution, how did your pricing strategy or pricing discussions change, not internally and also externally? Because there will be a positioning, right? At the end of the day, for per module, if it is 1,000 rupees per employee for attendance, when they started with attendance, if you keep on adding more modules, you can't just say 1,000 more, multiplied by 1,000. Because as you go up the value stream in terms of the pain points you're solving, do you change the pricing based on the effort, or because your product is modular, your architecture is taken care? Are you going to go based on the pain point that we're trying to solve? So how do you guys get to a state where now it's positioned?
So Rohit, as you're answering that question, I do want to make a request to everyone, and we should answer this question, but I think pricing will be a separate session altogether.
Oh, okay.
And I just want to urge everyone that please restrict your questions to product and product road mapping for this session. We want to keep it focused on, but please go ahead and answer the question, Rohit.
No, I think short answer to that was we sold it as a proposition where for at least the early customers, we said this is how all our modules are going to be: easy to use, configurable, etc. And whatever we build in the next 2 years, we'll give it to you for at the same price, right? Like, I mean, this is very tactical as an answer, but that's what we did. But I think as we grew, then we had a different price for a buffet, different price for a la carte, which is individual modules, etc. Obviously encouraging buffet and taking more, or having that upsell option. Yeah, but again, as Alok said, different, like a long session on pricing in itself.
Thank you.
Anand, welcome. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Hi, Alok. Hi, Rohit. In fact, my team and I have met today after a long time to tinker with our roadmap. So it's a very apt day for this topic. My question, Rohit, to you. So we run a company called Voiro, a vertical SaaS play, and we build revenue analytics technology for content-led companies for the media industry. My question to you is about analysis paralysis. So you mentioned 3 sources of roadmap pressure. Sales wanting to build something because there is a sale on the table, customers who are constantly placing feature requests in front of you, especially enterprise customers, and your own roadmap. And effectively, this is the scale of, urgent versus important. And that's effectively the kind of problems that you solve. So do you have a pet framework or something that you use to evaluate better the ROI of doing or not doing certain things? Because in the absence of that, my constant worry, and this is something that we've faced no matter at what scale. When we were 1 customer, we faced it. When we have more than 1 customer, we face it. When we have 10 customers, we face it. What might end up otherwise is you might end up making decisions with your gut, or the better champion will win. It's either the more aggressive salesperson or the more aggressive CSM who's shouting will win. So do you have a better framework to evaluate the ROI of doing or not doing certain things?
No, I think it's a fantastic question, Anand. I think because this is something all of us go through at whatever scale, right? And everybody struggles with this. So, I mean, you're not alone on this, at least that much I can say, while I might not have a perfect answer. But for us, I think, as I said, right, while these 3 percentages are there, it's sometimes thematic, right? If you don't have those themes around, now I want to grow fast, I'm okay to lose this account on this thing, and those are tough calls, right? I'm okay to lose this account, or I'm okay to all the founders going and talking to that account saying wait for a quarter or wait for a day, and then taking those tough calls saying, okay, now I want to grow quickly, there are these 4 deals which are pending on these 2 features. I would prioritize that because I need presence, my sales need references, all of that, right? Or in customer success, there are situations where, for example, we've had companies move to us from Workday, right? And obviously Workday has been building for 15 years and there are a certain set of features. And for us, when we and this all happened in 1 quarter, and when we shifted them, they felt a few features were like basic, right? Like they said, oh, I mean, this is an expectation. Why didn't you have it, right? While we can go back to them and say, hey, this is a different product and all of that. There is some base expectation, especially in the operational team, saying, okay, this was all available on Workday. Today, it's not available on Darwinbox. But we took a call saying, okay, now that we have Workday clients, we probably will have more in the future. And these are referenceable clients that we need to use, right? So maybe we should prioritize that. So it's a little thematic. I don't have a perfect answer. We can do an analysis of it. By the way, you can put a number to the churn potential that will happen because somebody is unhappy, or the roadmap, or lost revenue because we are not building out these features for the future, etc. The only thing is, Anand, I think the R roadmap bit, you need to be a little more flexible. And this happens in Darwinbox as well, right? So we have 3 founders fighting this battle of allocation. And when product says it's our roadmap being destroyed, I think the appreciation for product management should be that the roadmap is actually built on all 3 of them, right? It is not ours versus these 2 elements. And that that happened with us, right? Like, so when we went with this formula, it was like, okay, why am I getting pushed, right? My roadmap is the one which is sacrificing, but it is not, right? It is, I think there's that level of education should be that all of these are our roadmap. It is just choices that we are making, right? And I think that sensitization should be there. But yeah, we do the thematic approach to it. A lot of people do the ROI approach, which is if I lose this customer and the potential revenue from this customer in terms of references, etc., versus if I can close these deals. But what we make, I mean, I think one intervention we've done, which was great, was have this discussion, right? Like there is a quarterly roadmap discussion where everybody makes their case, right? And that was immensely helpful, because what happens is otherwise the creep is very easy into the roadmaps, right? Because every day there could be an urgency that creeps in. So at least you should have one discussion where all the leads, and this could be engineering, product, sales, marketing, customer success, implementation, all of them, debate this out, because that sensitizes everyone on saying, okay, there is so much bandwidth, and that's the truth of life, right? Like there is only X. How do we give this out, and what do we prioritize? If it's done on a larger forum, I think it will be better communicated across teams, etc. Otherwise, it will become silos where customer success will complain saying, oh, feature is not there. Sales is complaining saying, I could have sold if the feature was there. And these are realities, right? Like, I mean, the salesperson is unhappy because we are not building for that. Or the customer success person is unhappy because their NPS or their KRA, which is NPS linked, is getting killed. Or a product road manager is unhappy because adoption is super low, because they couldn't build the cool UI features that they wanted to build. So I think, yeah. But it's a real problem, and all of us go through this.
Got it. I am tempted to ask a question to Nitin. Actually, sorry, I'm chiming in. I know there are participants also, but I'm not able to hold my question, which is that usually, when you start a company, and particularly when you begin to meet investors, most investors will ask you, what is your product roadmap, right? And I guess everybody has to create that slide or a couple of slides which shows this quarter, next quarter, right? The reality though sometimes is that as an early stage founder, you don't even know what's there 4 quarters later in many cases. So there is a product roadmap that you prepare for the external world. And there is and it can be, by the way, it can be investors, it can be customers also. Sometimes customers ask you for that too. And then there is a product roadmap that you truly believe in. So I'm actually curious that at what point does a proper, meaningful, and I'm using the word longer term product roadmap, in which in my books I'm just saying 4 quarters out, actually became important for you as a company, as opposed to just it being there on a sort of piece of paper because you had to just put it out there as you were pitching yourself?
I'll start with just one point that I wanted to add to what Rohit said, to the previous question, which I think in some sense sort of also covers a part of the answer to this. See, I think when we talk about roadmap, right, we always talk about forward-looking roadmap. But I think the road that we've taken sort of in the rearview mirror is as important. Right? The point of Rohit saying, 3 founders sort of debating my roadmap versus your roadmap, etc., is a very healthy sort of ecosystem. Right? At Pando, we're 2 founders, and neither of whom had any supply chain experience. Right? And so we were, as a company, we're a very distribution-heavy business versus a product-heavy business. And therefore, a lot of this gets defined intrinsically by what can we sell, right? And so we had to sort of take a step back and say, listen, we've sold something and we built what we thought we could sell. Is it actually delivering value for customers now, right? And so this constant sort of look back to say, we have made a decision but with a certain team in mind, and that team has been agreed on and executed on. Vis-a-vis what is actually getting used on ground and what's actually delivering value, I think is an important sort of checkpoint to have, if not quarterly, at least yearly. Right? Yeah. And there are a lot of, and the question that my co-founder once asked me, which to me is one of the largest sort of product management lessons that I've learned, is all of us are building for the customer, meaning all the engineers are building for the customer, but who is building for the engineers, right? And interestingly, a lot of enterprise software companies have taken very early on this, basically set aside some capacity of the engineering team and the product team to build for the engineers versus everybody building for the customers, right? And that's a good way to sort of set aside some roadmap bandwidth to say, okay, now I built, let's say, reports, for example, right? We built, like, everybody's asking for reports, we're just custom building reports on the product for everybody, right? And this is something Rohit probably, appreciates. And then, like, obviously each report is custom or whatever, right? And then if we were to look back at the end of 1 year and say, okay, boss, I've built like 30 custom reports now.
Yeah.
And I think looking forward that for enterprise customers, custom reports is going to be a thing. Can we build a service that makes it easy for engineers to then build reports out of all the data on time? Right? Is an important question to ask, and it's even more than road mapping. It's building your organization around the roadmap that you have, right? And making it faster to turn around use cases. Companies like Eka Software have done a great job of this, where they've essentially set aside what they call a platforms team and consider their own product team. Sort of, you would consume services to then sort of build for the customer itself. To answer your question, Alok, I think we've constantly sort of taken a view of what the market can build, what we can sell, right, in the market. So positioning has changed. I think product features have not, right? I think it's a post-product market fit versus pre-product market fit question. And where do you hit product market fit is depends on what kind of business you are. If you're in the enterprise software space, I think 4 to 5 customers that pay you north of $100,000 each. If you're in that elephant hunting sort of space, if you're in the mid-market sort of space, probably if it's in the 10 to 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs a year sort of ACV, then probably about 20 customers that have some critical mass where you believe that you have customers where minimum viable product is actually selling. Right. And now it's a question of, even if you're losing deals, it's not because the customers saying this problem is not worth solving. It's because they're choosing a competitor or they're choosing somebody else who can solve the problem better than you. I think that is sort of the point where you start saying, hey, Workday has certain things. Let's start building those things because it's important that we don't lose to competition, right? In certain cases where the customer is essentially saying, boss, this problem that you're defining is not worth solving for me right now, and I'll solve it later. I would still question product market fit at that time. And I think at that time, it becomes very important that you just iterate on it. The way we solved for it lastly is actually, we hired product managers as pre-sales engineers or pre-sales folks, right? Who are not pre-sales engineers, but pre-sales folks. And so they would actually build out demos for customers even today of some features that are 3 months or 6 months out in the roadmap that would actually get built and demoed to customers even before we sell, right? And so with enterprise, we have that ability to say it's not going to go live tomorrow. If I'm starting a sales cycle today, I have 2 months to sell and 2 more months to go live. And so we start collecting feedback even before it's available on the product by actually hiring product managers into the pre-sales team. And letting them define what this roadmap was. And that's a good way to actually bridge the your roadmap, my roadmap problem by actually saying it's our roadmap by hiring across teams.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Sorry, I know, Tanaya, you have been quiet and you made a request that you wanted to be quiet, but at the same time, feel free to ask a question, answer a question, whatever you would like. So you don't have to be completely quiet. Should you choose to.
Thank you, Alok.
Yeah. There is a question on the Q&A panel, and I'm modifying it a little bit, which is how do you create feedback loops between sales and tech and product team? And I'm going to expand the question a little bit. I'm assuming when a company is very small, you have 1 or 2 salespeople and you have a couple of product managers. It's not frankly such a rocket science because people pick up the phone call. You don't create massive processes around it. At what stage have you begun to feel the need of some sort of a process coming into this picture to be able to solve for these feedback loops to be a bit more formal? Or do you think you are at that stage even now?
No, I think we have a process, Alok. I think for the last 1 year, we've been having processes where there are feedback loops, etc. So I think one big trigger for that was, like Nitin said, right? We did a road traveled experiment and we said, we built 1 year's roadmap. What percentage of this is actually being used, right? Because when we were building it, we were like, wow, this is going to change the world. Yeah. Or like, this is going to stop the client from going, or this is going to convert 4 large deals. And then we questioned ourselves saying, okay, are we, right? Like, are we closing 4 large deals? Because I mean, obviously in the sales enthusiasm, people will come in and say, hey, this feature will actually make me kill it in the market.
Right.
So that triggered it. And I think what helped is now we have by module, as I said, these councils that we have, product roadmap councils, where there is a certain bit of aggregation that is happening, both from all teams, right? So from sales, there is an aggregation saying, what are we hearing in the market?
Right.
The frequency you can figure out whether it's 15 days, 1 month, depending on your roadmap cycles. But from each team, there is an aggregation saying, this is what we are hearing by module. This is what we're hearing. This is good, bad. These are the features that is needed, etc. And then there is also the other way where product is giving feedback to customer success or implementation saying, this feature was built. It could have helped so many clients, but it was not changed. So what also happens, and this is something that we are trying to do through internal audits, etc., is we build a lot of cool features which were asked, but by then there is a workaround that's given to a client, and these are not used. So I mean, because everybody is running and everything, nobody goes back and says maybe this will be much better for you.
Yeah.
To structure it like this because we're building it as a platform, etc. Right? So I think those feedback loops are important. It took, I mean, we got to that point only when we realized, let's say, there were 2-3 roadmaps where 70% of the features were built only for one client.
Got it.
Right, and we justified to ourselves saying, hey, this is something all clients will love, want, need, etc. But that was the trigger, and we said, okay, let's go back. For example. And what we also thought was like when we did our first bank, there's a lot of security and compliance work we did, which hijacked the roadmap for like a month. But then we said, is this a differentiation that we can take back into the market? Right? If we didn't think about it, the feedback loop saying, okay, 80% of the time was spent on security and compliance in this roadmap. What are we doing here that is so different? And suddenly the sales guys bulb went off saying, he said, oh wow, this is like a huge differentiation from all the competitors. Why are we not selling this? Right, and it came out of a need from customer success where said RBI regulation, this has to be there.
Right.
So we need to do this, etc. And then it became a pitch saying, okay, we are the only compliant RBI regulation.
Got it. I know we have to stop sharp at 6. That's what we promised. So we will do that. So there are a couple of participants who have raised their hand. Naman, if we can bring at least one of them in. All right. That looks like a familiar person. Hi, Shyam. How are you?
Yeah, hello. Good. How are you?
Very good. So Shyam, go ahead. Ask your question.
Yeah. Hey, Rohit, Nitin. Thank you for the session. A quick question. So I'm currently working with 2 of my friends on a stealth mode startup. And, between us, we have hands-on experience on the business side, the go-to-market side, and a bit of engineering. But none of us have experience hands-on in terms of product. And we are in the process of wondering what's the right time to hire an external PM and manage, to kind of build and manage the roadmap. And also, while doing so, what are some of the learnings from your experience that you would, kind of want us to keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, we started similarly, Shyam. I think one of us Chaitanya decided to play the product manager. So for a PM, we look at 2 things. One is the functional understanding or appreciation, right? Like they need not be deep in HR, but they need to appreciate HR as a function. And other thing is the whole product elements, which is the whole product delivery life cycle, understanding competition, writing PRDs and all of that. So Chaitanya was very strong at this. He was a HR consultant, so he understood. So when we were building performance, he knew 20 types of performance reviews that happen in the market. So when he's thinking about it, he's actually looking at all those dimensions. On the other hand, he was not somebody who's built products before. So we complemented that with an associate product manager who was good at building products, right? Like what is the standard set? And we learned some of this from first principles, not worth it, right? Like even if it is a junior product manager who's done this before, some of these are very simple stuff like how do you write a PRD? What are the cycles that you need to go to? UI test, when should it happen? QA test, when should it happen? All of that. I think that understanding should be there. If that understanding exists in the system, then the founder who is closer to the detailing, closer to the function can play the product manager. But it's just that we learned it, we got delayed in terms of learning that. We learned it from first principle saying, okay, a roadmap should be written like this. It should be communicated much before, socialized much before, and then we start building it, all of that. But yeah, that's how we went about it. It's again a choice depending on somebody wants to go deep into product. If not, and everybody wants to be on the business side and right, like wants to be on the sales or a client facing side, then maybe you can hire a dance. If there is a lot of business understanding on your side, then I would index on the product building understanding or experience of product building.
Makes sense. Thanks. Thank you.
Got it. Actually, Shyam, thank you for asking that question, because I had the same question in my mind as well. I am actually, okay, let me see. I think there is a new question which has come on. Okay. Okay, there is a question on product market fit. I'll ask that as the last question, which is that, is it easier to go for product market fit from early to mid-stage market to enterprises, or the other way around? Actually, I'm struggling.
Is it easier to go up market or down market in terms of size?
Yeah, to find the product market fit. I don't know if one of you want to take it.
Nitin, maybe you should go. Like, I don't have an answer, honestly. Like,
I think it doesn't matter. I think in general, I think depending on which category you're in, each of these markets can be vastly different, or just marginally different, or incrementally significant, right? So very difficult to sort of give a generic answer across the board. What I can do is, our experience has actually been that we counterintuitively for a lot of folks started at the top of the market and then decided to go a little mid-market and then stay there across geographies, rather than sort of, and I think that's the experience with Rohit as well. I think it's the product market fit question is that with enterprises, the one thing that definitely, like Alok said, people don't buy out of emotion, they buy out of value. But also, I think when it comes to product management, the feature building, the very tactical piece of saying the one line of code that I write, right? The reality is that with enterprise customers, not every line of code that you write or everything that they want will be 100% significant value to them. And so product management becomes potentially even more important in the enterprise context than in the mid-market or the SMB context, because with SMB, you can actually, if you build a feature, it's going to be really valuable to them or not at all. And that distinction of black or white, I think, is relatively easier with, I'm still talking B2B. I'm not talking the consumer application side, but B2B SaaS, I think you can fairly quickly ascertain whether a feature is delivering value and therefore is valuable to the customer or not. With enterprises, I think processes, the way we do things, define a lot of feature building. Consequently, I think one has to, play the judge in saying, do I want to solve this problem or not? And even if it's not a very important problem to solve, am I willing to throw code at it to in turn sort of have the opportunity to solve larger problems? Has been our experience. I don't know if that answered your question, but product management is important, I think, more for
Yeah, and a quick reality bite, like we wanted to build Darwinbox Lite from, I think, when we met Alok 4 years back. We've not been able to, right? So it's, I think, going up market, down market are not easy things on product. I think mid to enterprise or small to mid is still okay, but small to enterprise or enterprise to small is like a different ballgame.
Agreed. So, folks, I know we have already passed 6, so we will take the session to a close. I want to thank, of course, Rohit, Nitin, Arvind, and Tanaya, who agreed to be on the live panel here today, and everybody else who joined as well. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your energy. And please do write to us if you have specific topics that you would like to discuss, even though we have our own list that we have, but please do keep writing to us. If there are specific topics that you want to focus on, we'll be happy to bring people in for those sessions in the future also. Thank you.